Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode of Real Talk with Shan and Bilal, otherwise known as Real Talk with Bilal and Shan. But we say Shan and Bilal because it rolls off the tongue better and it's just more enjoyable.
That's the feedback we got from our friends when we were making this podcast.
Actually, true story. Yeah, we were going around to people. And we're like, okay, so like, what do you vibe with, right? What do you vibe with? And they said they vibed with Shan and Bilal, so that's how we actually ended up choosing it. And it's just aesthetically pleasing. It's just a nice way, right, to present the title. But anyway, regardless of what the title is, you guys know we are gonna spend who knows how many minutes. It might be 20, it might be 200 minutes talking about the news of the week. Today, what we're gonna be talking about is all of Trump's new cabinet positions. It looks like, just like he started his presidency by, making a new cabinet that everyone was like, oh my god, like, at all these appointments, he is now reshuffling the UN ambassador position, the attorney general, and not quite, well, it's technically a cabinet position, the chief of staff. It's not technically appointed by the Senate because it's an extremely powerful secretary position, for lack of a better phrase. But what we're going to be talking about is his new appointment. Once again, still subject to approval by the Senate, but because it's 53-47, almost definitely will be his new appointment to the UN ambassador. To be the UN ambassador to the United Nations, or the head of the delegation, being Heather Nauert. Now, before we jump in, give our opinions, I'm going to go through a really quick biography. She's educated at Mount Vernon Seminary and College for undergrad. She then went to Columbia for her master's in journalism. Before serving in the government, she was a Fox News pundit and host. She then went on to be the Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. She was the spokesman for the U.S. State Department starting in April of 2017. Then she assumed that position along with being Undersecretary for State and Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. And now Donald Trump has appointed her to be the UN ambassador to the United Nations. So the first thing is, and I kind of think this is an obvious comparison, is she going to be better or worse than Nikki Haley? Basically just comparing her to Nikki Haley. First of all, I don't like this appointment because she's she's very unqualified. Looking at all the other UN ambassadors we've had, she's probably the least qualified in history. I mean, we've gone from, just think about this, we've had governors, we had George H.W. Bush, a man of that caliber, and now we're to an overglorified, Fox News pundit. So, I really want your take on this, Sean. What do you think was going on here?
Well, before I get to Nikki Haley, who basically preceded Heather Nauert pending her Senate confirmation, I don't think this is a great pick. But at this point in time, we're looking at this selection from a very technocratic point of view. Because let's face it, Trump made this move basically as a PR stunt because he knows that she has good reach because of her connections at Fox, because of the fact that she was able to pull in viewers in her Fox and Friends show and her bit, basically. And the fact that Trump has now elevated her to the pedestal, of representing...
Pedestal, dude, that's a wave, that's a vibe. I'm messing with you. I'm messing with
an Indian accent, man. Okay, but the fact that now she's upgraded to a UN ambassador, representing the United States in the UN, she's basically a call to the heartland of the people who voted for Trump. Basically to the people who watch Fox News, to the people who support his agenda. She's basically someone who is familiar to them. And in that sense, they will gravitate towards her because of the fact that not only has she had governmental experience with this administration, being the spokesperson for the State Department led by, and now it's Pompeo, right?
It's Pompeo,
yeah. Pompeo. So, just as a PR move, to market his administration to his base, this is a good move. But from a purely technocratic point of view, and from my point of view, the only perspective that matters, I don't think this is a great pick, especially because Nikki Haley actually made some accomplishments. Whether or not you disagree with
Nikki Haley was fantastic. I think Nikki Haley was very. First of all, Nikki Haley is very well spoken.
Yeah.
She knows how to present herself. She knows how to respect the United States. Like when Nikki Haley was first chosen, that was one of the picks that I was most happy about. I was like, this is someone that I could really get behind. This is someone that I can vibe with.
Right.
This is someone that I can support. Because once again, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Nikki Haley's so bad. She's a Republican. She's conservative. This, you, that, you." It's a Republican president. That's like a Republican being mad at Obama for choosing a Democrat.
And she had very strong convictions in the UN too, especially going after not going after, but especially with the actions that she took in support of Israel. I mean, you could only tell the only countries that supported her were like freaking Togo and the Honduras or Guatemala or one of those countries.
Yeah.
So, like, she definitely knew what she was doing, and at the same time, she didn't back down because of what other countries were saying. But in addition to that, just in terms of her accomplishments, some of the very few accomplishments, and this is according to an article on The Hill about some of her accomplishments. One of her first orders of business was the successful unanimous UN Security Council Resolution 2356 in June 2017 that sanctioned economically a list of individuals and entities that were engaged in or providing support for North Korea's nuclear program. Even more remarkable was the fact that she secured another unanimous signal. This one, it was a UNSC Resolution 2371 against North Korea, with the most punishing sanctions yet, which banned North Korea's top exports, costing the regime $1 billion per year, and that's what people really thought was the precursor to Kim Jong-un opening up to South Korean President Moon Jae-in, especially President Trump later on, as we saw earlier.
Oh wait, just so everyone knows, we're obviously talking about Nikki Haley, because I feel like we were bouncing back and forth. This is about Nikki Haley.
Right, this is about some of Nikki Haley's best accomplishments.
Definitely, yeah.
While she was the UN ambassador to the United States. Anyway, and then another one was a unanimous resolution which followed that one. It was UNSC Resolution 2375, which imposed strict oil sanctions on North Korea. So you're kind of sensing a theme here. She definitely went after North Korea very hard, which is something that previous administrations hadn't done, even though they had promised to.
And it was in line with Trump's platform.
Yeah.
Trump's platform, one of the big things he was lauded on, what was it? I think it was early summer, right? Mm-hmm. Where he was, like that weird transition period between spring and summer, where he met with, Kim Jong-un, and they actually had the meeting, right? Yeah. That was the peak of Trump's presidency, and that's where he was the most presidential, oddly enough. But going back to Heather Nauer, in terms of her qualifications, I pulled up this New Yorker article, which summarizes the experience of past presidents. I'm just going to read down a bit. Quote, "The Congressman George H.W. Bush, who became UN ambassador in 1971, went on to be president. Adlai Stevenson had already been the governor of Illinois and a presidential candidate before he went to the UN. Arthur Goldberg had been a member of John Kennedy's cabinet and a Supreme Court justice." End quote. Another person would be Tom Pickering, who, quote, had a storied diplomatic career as ambassador to Israel, Jordan, El Salvador, and Nigeria, end quote. You had people like Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., who, quote, had been the ambassador to Germany and South Vietnam before the UN. He went on to be Richard Nixon's vice presidential running mate, end quote. You have a bunch of these super qualified people. And then, her. I don't really know how you get to that. I don't really know how that can be defended. And what I really don't get is if he's really trying to go for a messaging, kind of thing, why was Nikki Haley forced out? Because apparently she had come. Apparently it had been clear. She said she's going to resign at the end of the year, and apparently there'd been some agreement that she was only going to go for 2 years.
I'm not sure about that. I haven't read any stories.
But
I can definitely tell you that I think it wasn't Trump really that favored her as much as his administration did. His left and right hand men, who basically said that this is someone whose technocratic prowess, especially, and the fact that she sided with Trump on pretty much 98% of foreign policy issues, is going to be what's going to make her a very effective person to represent the U.S. at the UN. So it wasn't really him, and you could clearly see that because she obviously was qualified. She had convictions in the UN, and she wasn't just someone who went there to politically posture for Fox News.
Here's the thing. Here's why I'm gonna have to call you out on the argument. The thing is, at the end of the day, it's his cabinet. He's the one that's appointing people, right?
Yeah.
So regardless of whether or not other people are forcing him to do it, it's not like the chief of staff recommends it to the Senate, who then confirms it. Donald Trump ultimately has that final choice. So
yeah, exactly.
that's my thing with this. He's choosing people that he kind of likes on the flip of a dime. Like if he likes you for a moment, for some reason that gets you in. If he doesn't like you for a moment, that's enough to kick you out. I mean, one of the main reasons that he wasn't able to kick out John Kelly for a while, as was like shown in Fear, was because he didn't know who he would use to fire John Kelly. Because he was using John Kelly to fire so many other people. Now that he's trying to fire John Kelly, it's kind of odd. That was a nice segue, wasn't that? That was slick, right?
That was very good because of the fact that now reports are coming in that John Kelly, who is Trump's current chief of staff, might soon be resigning.
Which I would not be surprised at all. John Kelly has been... John Kelly is really in a position that no chief of staff should be put in. He's been...
Yeah.
He went to Georgetown, too. That's great.
He's basically the militaristic wingman of Donald Trump in terms of carrying out his orders.
Militaristic?
Militaristic, I mean in the sense that he's a warrior type of guy. He's the type of guy, not in a belligerent way, but he says things like it is. People are intimidated by him, and that's why Trump chose him as the person who would convey his messages in a negative light to other people, such as firings.
We completely forgot about Reince Priebus.
Whatever
happened to Reince Priebus?
He was an RNC chief. I think what was his title? Yeah, he was the RNC chairman.
Yeah.
When Trump was running, it was actually January of 2011 to January of 2017. After which he joined the Trump cabinet as the chief of staff, really as the transitional chief of staff, and then he quit July. He was fired, I think, July of 2017. The dude's been just tossed at the side of the road. Nobody even remembers him anymore.
Which was really weird. I remember so much of the early stories in the Trump presidency was that constant conflict going between Trump and the people that have been put in by the RNC. And actually, that's a really good way you might want to look at this. Early on, a lot of the cabinet picks were people that Trump was being recommended, right? Condoleezza Rice recommended Rex Tillerson. The Republican establishment was recommending Reince Priebus. Everybody liked Jim Mattis, so they put in Jim Mattis. You had all these kind of relatively, if you wanted to continue the connection, Betsy DeVos, has big conservative roots. So all these people that the right was like pressuring him to put in, and then he obviously had some of his own choices like putting Steve Bannon in, but a lot of those people, Steve Miller as well, but those were not cabinet positions; those are advisory positions. The cabinet positions were kind of early on pressured by the conservative branch, by regular Republicans. What the Trump presidency a lot for the past 2 years has been tearing apart all of that. And the reason there have been so many firings is I think he's been trying to replace all of those people with people that embody his own views and his own values. He every single action he takes basically is a rebuttal to that early on action being taken by the conservatives, regular conservatives, mind you, that were basically trying to constrain him. And I think this is him, trying to break free basically.
Yeah. I mean, you can also tell that he tacitly was against Trump in much of his rhetoric, really. The fact that he was being used as a pawn in order to fire...
Wait, are we talking about Kelly?
Yeah, John Kelly.
Yeah.
And I think the most telling thing about John Kelly, like the most telling moment of his, when he really rebuked Trump in a tacit manner, and it really went over a lot of people's heads. I did read it in an article in the Washington Post. I think just in terms of his body language, you can see when the events of Charlottesville conspired in August of last year, 2017, Trump was giving that now infamous press conference where he said there were very fine people on both sides and there was violence and bigotry.
Oh no, you're talking about the car incident, right?
The car incident.
What was it? Rally for the Right?
Unite the Right rally.
Unite the Right.
At Charlottesville, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was
at UVA.
That was back when John Kelly, I think he was still chief of staff back then. Yeah.
He was chief of staff.
Yeah, because he assumed that position July of 2017. So yeah, he was a month into his position, and you could tell when Donald Trump was saying those words, and he was giving that press conference.
He was so pained.
He was so pained. He was just, his hand was on his forehead. He was absolutely just pissed off.
Okay.
He didn't say anything. He didn't really acknowledge it later on.
It was August. Oh wait, keep talking. I'm just trying to find the exact event.
Yeah. So from that moment on, I had this gut feeling that John Kelly didn't really want to be as closely associated to Trump as he may have previously wanted to be, and he also realized that the more control he has on the president, the better it is for the country in terms of his rhetoric. That is.
Okay, so really, real quick then. So the Unite the Right rally with the incident, where with the car incident, was actually August 11th to 12th of 2017. And he took over July 31st. So it was like a week and a half after. He was still getting used to being chief of staff. But that's another thing. Is it unique that Trump has been shuffling around people within his cabinet, not just firing people, but he'll take people from one position and then move them over to another? Or is John Kelly just the only one that's happened to? I can almost swear to God it's happened before. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I mean, it certainly does contribute to a hostile climate for the rest of the country, seeing the alarmingly high rates of turnover in the White House. And Trump has also... Now, this has nothing to do with...
I think Reagan's done it. So, sorry, keep going, but I'm pretty sure Reagan's done it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I keep cutting you off. My bad.
No, that's fine. So, yeah, just... Are you looking that up now?
I'm looking it up, but I'm trying to find James Baker, who's like really good friends with George Bush. Bless his soul. Oh
yeah.
We'll talk about that at the end. But James Baker, who's a very good friend to George Bush Sr. He was the 67th. He was Reagan's Secretary of the Treasury, and then he was Bush's Secretary of State.
Yeah.
As well as the Chief of Staff.
He was the chief of staff under Clinton, I think, right?
No, H.W. Bush.
Oh,
he had really good ties to Reagan.
That was at the end of his presidency.
I'm
that was
trying to
during
find
the election.
No, okay. Here's the chronology. Here's the chronology. Okay, Chief of Staff 81 to 85, and then in 85 he becomes the Secretary of the Treasury until 88, and August 17th of 1988, not 1888. What am I talking about? Then he becomes Secretary of State from 1989 to 1992, and then the Chief of Staff again from 1992 to 1993. Okay, you were saying.
I don't even remember.
I don't even remember.
Oh, okay. Wait. I was just getting to the point that this kind of hostile climate really does undercut a lot of the economic kind of accomplishments of the Trump administration. And I know this is not the best time to say that because very lately the economy has taken a downturn.
Ooh, it's shaky, dude. It's shaky.
The Dow average is down, I think.
It's insane.
Yeah, the Dow average since this morning is down almost 600 to 700 points, which is absolutely insane. And it's been going on. There's been a rapid market sell-off because I believe that, okay, this is kind of a tangent, but I just want to go off on it just for a second. The economy was artificially boosted around a quarter ago because of the fact that there were tariff concerns and embargo concerns regarding countries like China and their trade relationships.
Which happens.
They're deteriorating trade relationships with the U.S., especially after Trump, the self-proclaimed tariff man, is now saying that he's going to tariff like thousands and thousands of Chinese imports, and that's really resulted in companies buying rapidly in lump sum amounts, and now there's a huge market sell-off going on because there's not as much economic activity as a result of that insinuatory speculation. Now, other than that, especially in 2017, the economy was roaring. The economy was really in Trump's favor. And that's really why, I mean, for the main part. And that's really why his base weren't really as disillusioned as they may be right now, because they still had faith that he could carry out a lot of the economic responsibilities and bringing back manufacturing and coal jobs as he promised. Now, there are a lot of flaws with that.
For the record, though, how much of that was just due to leftovers from Obama's economy?
Well, the Obama economy really, as per economists, I don't remember the exact month, but I know that the layover effect really stopped at around, I think it was October of 2017.
You can't, an economic policy that's as unique and as robust as Obama's, especially when he had to keep negotiating with the Republicans, that doesn't just change like overnight. Especially when the head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, not Powell, what was it?
Jerome Powell.
Jerome Powell. There you go.
What's his name?
I like how I know the person. I can imagine their face.
Yeah, I think it is.
It's Jerome something, right?
Yeah, I forgot.
Jerome Powell, yeah, we're good.
Right.
He was for a decent while. He was continuing the policies of not Donald Trump of President Obama. He kept those policies going, and then now that the economy is kind of going back down, he's like, okay, guys, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do this. But I think for the most part, he was pretty the economy.
Well, he did raise the rates a little bit in order to keep the economy from overheating as it did mid 2017. But basically, from what I was saying, the economy overall hasn't tanked. And although it might seem like it's going really downhill now, there is no indication that it is going to keep getting worse in the long run. And because of that, there was really no need for Donald Trump to insert this kind of hostile climate by moving people around, by increasing the amount of already high turnover in his administration, and just unnecessarily creating panic within the country because of the raucous nature of his administration. All he has to do is, honestly, it's telling when his approval rating increases. Not only increases, it spikes when he goes on foreign tours. When he went to Saudi Arabia, when he went to Europe, his approval rating increased almost 5%.
Because don't touch the economy.
Yeah.
What he should have done.
Honestly, no. For him, it's not just don't touch the economy. It's just don't talk. Just don't talk.
Shut up. That happens with every. I don't mean to you. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to you. But when he shuts up, everyone begins to level because he's like it's almost like Bush. It's weirdly like Bush. When he's not saying vile stuff on Twitter, he is like a really, offensive Bush.
And the thing is, his rhetoric has very little to do with the actual policy remedies that he pushes. But the thing is, people will obviously gravitate more towards his rhetoric because that's how he feels as the leader of the executive branch of this country and the most probably the most powerful person on the planet in terms of how much he controls legislation and how the world works socially. So, honestly, yeah, that's the thing. There is absolutely no need for this. And what I was going to say as well, and I think I said this a couple months ago when we were talking about his cabinet in one of our first episodes, was the fact that he does keep a lot of positions open intentionally because he sees the appeal to having a smaller, lesser reaching government, because he sees the appeal to his base that the government should not be taking care of people. The kind of Reagan wing of the Republican Party, more self-responsibility, individualist, libertarian wing. And he's really kind of appealing to them by having a lot of positions open. Now, that doesn't explain the high rates of turnover. There's just a lot of clashes within the administration because they're not working together. Donald Trump isn't exactly a great person to lead the executive branch, obviously. He's just the guy who oversees things. He's the guy who's marketing. He's a marketing genius. But that's about it. You can't market your way into policy remedies that can potentially save the domestic situation and the foreign policy remedies that our country requires at this point.
Can you just chill out, right? Just okay. We've gone way off topic.
I mean, we're talking about the turnover.
We're talking about the turnover, right?
Yeah.
I was so positive that there was one president that took his Secretary of State, made him the Secretary of the Treasury. Took his Secretary of Treasury, made him Secretary of State. I can imagine that, and I just can't find it. Was it Bush?
I don't remember.
I went through. We're really history nerds, dude. I'll really go through the Wikipedia pages and just absorb it in the middle of class. It will be X-Files, and I'll be like, yo, this is a vibe. But who did that? I'm clicking on cabinet. Sean, do you see me clicking on cabinet? I love how we do this live too, because we're talking to each other and it's a mood. Who doesn't love this? Cabinet. Here we go. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
The Secretary of the Treasury. No. Oh, by the way, I love how Secretary of Treasury was Jon Snow, my boy. Mad quick. The last Avengers movie of the current timeline and the last season of Game of Thrones are both coming out in April. Which is a mood. Okay. Like I was saying, did he just not have an attorney general for his last year? Anyway.
True. I don't know.
It's succeeded by Michael. Oh, I think they just didn't put him in on the Wikipedia page.
Oh, okay.
What else is there? We talked about John Kelly. We talked about Heather Nauert. Who's the last one? What was the one? Attorney General. Right
now it's Matt Whitaker, but I don't think he's the potential. I don't think he's a permanent replacement. They're just trying to find someone else.
No, okay. So here's the way I looked up the constitutional provision. Here's the way it works.
Matt Whitaker is the interim one, but
No. He's not interim. There's 3 different ways. There's interim.
Yeah.
There's acting, and then there's actual, right?
Yeah.
So interim would basically be like, oh, some guy got fired. He's gonna take the position until you can appoint a new one.
Oh.
So here's the provision. There's 2 ways that a person can be removed. You either resign or you're fired. If you resign willfully, then that means Trump is able to appoint a temporary replacement for, I think, 210 days.
Okay.
If you're fired, that means the second in command instantly takes over.
Okay.
So, if you remember, this is why there is a big debate over whether or not Jeff Sessions was resigning or firing, and there was a big dispute over what the meaning of the wording "as per your request" or whatever, like as per your suggestion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which some people took to be firing because he was told, but technically on the letter it said "I resign."
Okay.
So that's why Trump was able to put in this guy temporarily without Senate confirmation. But now,
so Matt Whitaker is not the person he's just acting right
he's
now.
acting U.S. Attorney General.
And Trump has nominated William Barr, who was the former Attorney General for George H.W. Bush, I think.
Yeah, George H.W. Bush.
He held that post in the 90s for George H.W. Bush, and he has been nominated by President Donald Trump to be the new Attorney General of the United States to replace Jeff Sessions.
The big thing about Matt Whitaker was whether or not what his opinions were on the Mueller investigation, and his was tainted overall due to the wording of the Sessions thing. It was just a big mess, right?
Yeah.
I'm going into this without knowing at all what William P. Barr's opinion is on the Mueller investigation. With that said, without knowing his opinion on the Mueller investigation, I would say I would be fine with William P. Barr as the Attorney General. Once again, I can't really say anything against him. He seems like a qualified man. Let's look at his history. He was the United States Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel. That's 89 to 90. From 90 to 91, he was the U.S. Deputy Attorney General. From 91 to 93, he was the Attorney General. So he seems like a guy that knows what he was doing, And, regardless of my own... he went to Columbia for his bachelor's and master's. He went to GW for his Juris Doctor. He seems like a guy that knows his stuff. He seems like a reputable guy that I could trust with the State Department.
I'm trying to look up basically some of the policies that he supported as AG of George H.W. Bush, and later on. He's actually been pretty good on the issue of marijuana in the sense that he hasn't been vehemently...
gang, we're living, we're thriving.
He's basically called, as George H.W. Bush, he was a lot more militant when it came to curbing drug usage as he continued Nixon's drug war.
Okay.
And largely unsuccessfully. I mean, remember when there's actually a very famous clip going around, or that went around back then. It's on YouTube where George H.W. Bush was addressing the nation from his office, and he held up a baggie of.
Didn't he say this is crack cocaine?
Yeah, this is crack cocaine. It's like, where the heck did he get that from? But that's basically he was.
I always love to think how they plan those different events. It's like, okay, Mr. President, here is your crack.
Yeah.
Make sure that you show this properly. Don't do anything. And then, 20 minutes later, the FBI agents come back. Half the bag's missing. It's like, Mr. President, what you do? He's like, I'm fine. I didn't do anything.
Pretty much. Basically, although the president was pretty anti-drugs back then, in a very unnuanced manner, in my opinion, William Barr actually has been a lot better on that issue. He hasn't exactly ruled completely anti-marijuana on many cases. And he has approved of, he did, when he held the post in the 90s, he did approve of George H.W. Bush's measures to try and curb drug use in the least lethal possible manners, and in order to keep the kind of black market of drugs, especially of marijuana, from gaining prominence by kind of putting a huge cap on the market by banning it from the general public. So he didn't do any of that. There is room for optimism in that point if you're on the more left or just libertarian of that perspective, even though a lot of conservatives also support it too, because it's more of a libertarian issue than anything.
It really is a libertarian issue. And it's not even a libertarian issue, it's just I don't know how to describe it. It's just something that most people kind of get behind.
It's just economics at the end of the day as well.
Yeah. It's that thing where it's like, you can't... How do I explain this? It's one of those things where the black market is going to exist whether or not you like it. It's going to kind of just happen.
You're only going to make them more powerful. Like, Prohibition didn't work. It was a massive failure. Heck, we're still facing with the repercussions of that today with the existence of the mafia and their continued lineage. So it's just going to be worse if you do that same thing with drugs. And good thing that we're moving away from that trend as a society.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah,
in terms of... Most of the time, the controversy in these episodes come from our disagreement, but I feel like we both kind of agree.
And that was just one issue. I don't like. There's not a lot that has been made public about William Barr, aside from the fact that he's.
The investigations are going to be going into his past. You know they're going to be going into his past.
This is very new. I think he was only nominated. I think like yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
So
it was really recently.
It's really recently. So we're going to definitely hear more about this in the news, for better or for worse, in the upcoming days. Definitely.
So then, how about we close off on the passing of the former president, George H.W. Bush. He was, I think, a good way to just commemorate the guy was acknowledging how powerful of a speech his son gave at his funeral. Let's look down his record, which is one of the most impressive records in you know.
It's unbelievable how much public service
he's done so much. He was
amazing. I mean, since
wait, should I just read it down?
Yeah, sure.
He was a member of the U.S. House from 67 to 71.
No, okay. Even before that, though, he served in the United States Navy from 1942 to 1945.
He's a vet.
Yeah, exactly. He's a military vet.
He's not just a vet. He
started his service in 1942. And wait, when was he born? I want to see when.
1924.
1924. So he started service at the age of 18 years old.
Yeah.
He was deployed at the age of 18 in World War II, and he nearly died. He was in Japan. It was a military bombardment from the Japanese troops, and he was basically there pretty much all by himself. The only one in his bombardment that actually survived. He was waiting for help before the enemy could find him, and he would have almost certainly been cannibalized at that point in time, but I guess not. Nope.
I always like to think of what I've been able to go into World War II. Like these brave men did, and he's one of those.
It's just unbelievable.
He's from a generation that really knew how to.
Can you imagine in the enemy country all by yourself? You don't know when help is going to come or whether or not it's going to come at all. No mode of communication, and you were pretty much on the brink of death. All you had to do at that point is pray, and he made it out alive. Not even that, he went on to live another.
He embodies what it means to be like a proper public servant.
Exactly. And just keep going after that.
Oh yeah. So from 67 to 71, he was in the U.S. House. From 71 to 73, he was the UN ambassador to the UN. From 73 to 74, he was the chairman of the Republican National Committee. From 74 to 75, he was the chief of the U.S. Liaison Office to the Republic of China. From 76 to 77, he was the director of the CIA. From 81 to 89, he was the vice president of the United States. And from 89 to 93, he was the president of the United States.
He pretty much served every year of his life.
He's done it all.
From 67 to 93, he was a public servant, which is amazing. That is like one of the best repertoires I have ever seen for any public servant. Not one of the best, probably the best.
In terms of variety, that's kind of insane.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Especially for a modern, compared to the presidents that have been around him, right? Let's go from this time backwards. Donald Trump, no public service. Obama, state senator, president. H.W. Bush, governor, president. Or Governor Bush, W. Bush, governor to president. Bill Clinton, state attorney general, governor, president. And then this guy. This guy's insane. And then Jimmy Carter was what? Governor of Georgia? Was that a member of the House, I think, might have been?
Governor, I think there's a member. Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable, his repertoire.
And
I think he almost
he was a member of the Georgia Senate from the 14th district from 63 to 67. He was governor of Georgia from 71 to 75. And then he was the president of the United States from 77 to 81. But okay, here he's a good president. H.W. Bush, when both of us can agree on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of his policies, there are definitely some minor disagreements, but in terms of who he was as a person, in terms of his character, I mean, he was pretty much second to none in terms of how he carried himself in the office, in terms of his qualifications, and he's got to be right up to. And the reason why he didn't really get a re-election bid is because Bill Clinton was a really charismatic and young and very connectable president, as well as the fact that Ross Perot, the third-party candidate, got 19% of the popular vote in the 1992 election.
Just fucking bodied. It was close, dude. It was
It
close.
was really, really close. And for that, George H.W. Bush definitely did a lot of things right. He oversaw the U.S. as the Soviet Union collapsed at the end of the Cold War era, really. He accelerated the ending. He oversaw the U.S.'s intervention of a lot of the Gulf countries during the Gulf War in 1990 to 1991, I believe, and he kept Iraq from basically conquering the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, because let's face it, Saudi Arabia had not a
Saudi Arabia.
they had no hope against the Iraqi military.
Straight bangers.
Now, you can argue with the effectiveness of that strategy and whether or not it was basically the beginning of the proxy war that would later escalate into a real war when we go into Iraq when his son becomes president. But just as surprisingly, he was pretty harsh on Israel too. For a Republican president, I think he held off $1 billion something worth dollars of subsidies or
Just
economic aid. And it's because of the fact that Israel was building settlements, or they were in the Gaza Strip. No, not the Gaza Strip. It was the West Bank at the time, because they moved away from the Gaza Strip later.
I mean, just think about this. He just the simple fact that he oversaw the peaceful transition of the United States from, the peaceful transition from the Soviet Union to Russia without major conflict.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is an accomplishment.
Exactly, and it was a really, really good one.
So yeah.
Rest in peace, and he will
Rest
go
in
down
peace.
as one of the most accomplished, I don't know about the best, but one of the, if not the most accomplished public servants in our country's history. And it's really, like, you have to say something when he gets lied in state in the Capitol Rotunda. That just, only 35 people in U.S. history have ever had that distinction.
insane.
Him and John McCain have had that distinction this year in and of itself. So with that, we are going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk with Shan and Bilal, where we discussed a variety of issues ranging from the high rates of turnover in the Trump administration to the passing of George Herbert Walker Bush Sr. So thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to catch up with us next time we upload. Hopefully it's going to be next week. Peace.
Bye, guys.
Thing we're